Hello Exiles, it's Dosi here, bringing you another build guide. Like last time, I've tried my best to be thorough, but I may have made some mistakes or forgotten some things. I'll try my best to address anything I may have forgotten in the comments. I've also timestamped the video so you can jump to the parts you're interested in. For those who don't know me, I'm a one build a league type of guy, usually. But this league has been a bit hectic. Nothing I played felt good. Either the build was too slow, too clunky, dealt too low damage, or was too squishy. I was on the verge of giving up on this league as a whole. In a last-ditch effort, I played around an interesting interaction and then I landed on something so smooth, so fast, and with so much bonk per second that I had to make a video. Although I designed this build with Mageblood in mind, I've linked a POB in the description of the video which includes two cheaper non-Mageblood setups if you want to copy this build, but on a tighter budget. You will also find my current setup, and two more expensive setups for you wealthy 1%ers. Welcome to my build guide. In 3.24 Necropolis League, GGG introduced a new tier of maps. Although tier 17s were supposed to be a bridge between non-Uber and Uber content, they've turned out to be the hardest content in the game. So, I decided to challenge myself and make an off-meta build capable of farming this league's newest and hardest content, juiced back to basics tier 17 maps. While digging around, I realized there's a replica version of the Badge of the Brotherhood amulet. Instead of stacking maximum power charges like with the original version, you stack maximum frenzy charges and gain max endurance charges. But it also gives you +1 max fortification per endurance charge. You'd normally have a very hard time sustaining endurance charges because of the amulet, but if we use Ralakesh's Impatience riveted boots, we gain permanent +1 maximum fortification stack per frenzy charge. On the passive skill tree, there's a fortification mastery that reduces the duration of ailments on you by 2% per fortification stack. So, if you manage to reach 50 max fortification, you're ailment immune, as long as you're hitting enemies. Not just elemental ailments, but poison and bleed too. You can get 6 max fortification stacks on the passive skill tree, and get the mastery in the process. You can get a few more with the lethal pride. To go ham on max fortification stacks, we use the new Celestial Brace Goliath gauntlets, which give us free fortify on melee hit, up to +10 maximum fortification, and increased attack speed per fortification. My current setup has 48 max fortification charges, which means we are effectively ailment immune. For fortify to work, we have to use a melee skill, and the skill that scales best with frenzy charges is Frenzy. It's also a skill that scales immensely with quality. By default, it gains 5% more attack damage and speed per frenzy charge, but when we link it to a level 4 enhance and socket it in a green socket in a Dialla's Malefaction, we achieve 90% quality on the gem, giving us 14% more attack damage and speed per frenzy charge. That's insane. With this combination of items, both our offense and defense scale really well through frenzy charges. That means we will be looking for as many frenzy charges as we can. We'll find them on synthesized and corrupted item implicits. We'll have +2 from the Trickster ascendancy. We'll also go for a Grace Sublime Vision to gain a final extra frenzy charge. With all that, we don't have a lot of slots left in the build. This means we need some ingenuity to find ways to have enough resistances, accuracy, and stats. In 3.24 Necropolis League, Mageblood prices are the lowest they've ever been. This is why I believe it's now a reasonable item to recommend. It gives us some stats directly on the item, but it also allows us to have a bunch of resistances thanks to well-rolled magic flasks. We use the remaining flask slots to gain damage, speed, and tankiness. We fill our missing resist thanks to a rare helmet. We chose Blizzard Crown as our base because it gives us a lot of flat damage. You could probably achieve similar results with any rare helmet that has Eldritch implicits. To be honest, this is probably the weakest slot on the build. For accuracy, we decided to completely ignore the stat, and instead, we're sacrificing a prefix on our weapon to craft hits can't be evaded. It is a big price to pay, but using this craft means we are immune to blind, and to monster increased evasion and player reduced accuracy map mods. Additionally, thanks to Necropolis crafting, we can still get some very high LE damage weapons. In the description of the video and in the notes of the POB, I'll link the graveyard setup I used to craft my weapon. It costs around 3 divs per attempt, and it took me 2 tries to get my weapon. Stats are really hard to find on this build. We gain some strength from Lethal Pride nodes, which should be enough. We find intelligence on our ring, but it unfortunately is not enough. We have to pick Thief's Craft on the tree. Dexterity isn't a problem, but since we cap spell suppression with tattoos, we need to be really mindful of how much we have and how much we need. For those of you who don't know, you can socket gems in any socket in the Diallas with no regard to its color, but you will gain different bonuses depending on the color. That means we need to pay close attention to the color of our sockets and our body armor. Blue sockets are useless for us. We only want green sockets which add 30% quality to a gem, or red sockets which add 2 levels to a gem. Then you need to know if the support gem gains more from 30% quality or from 2 levels. So, we don't have a lot of choices for our body armor. The best support gems and our main skill Frenzy are simply too good to pass up on. We already know that we're using Frenzy in a green socket for quality and Enhance in a red socket for levels. Since we're melee, we socket Multi-Strike or the Awakened version if you have the currency for it. Quality is a little bit better than gem levels here, but if you're having a hard time coloring your chest, levels are fine too. Since we're stacking Frenzy charges, Ice Bite gives us a buttload of flat cold damage and increased damage. Here, gem levels are much better than quality, so you want to socket Ice Bite in a red socket. Since we're stacking endurance charges, we use endurance charge on melee stun to again gain a shit ton of more damage multiplier. This gem doesn't gain anything either from quality or gem levels, so it doesn't really matter what color you socket it in. Now that means we only have 1 link remaining. If we're going for quality of life, we want awakened elemental damage with attacks because it makes us immune to LE reflect. If we're going for pure damage, we want Trinity, as long as our maximum lightning damage is higher than our minimum cold damage. Quality is better than gem levels here too, so you want to put it in a green socket. If we don't deal enough lightning damage, we're back to awakened LE damage with attacks, which we also want to socket in a green socket for extra quality, which is better than gem levels. In our helmet, we socket our movement skills, our curse, and blood rage. For our movement skills, we use Whirling Blades to move around fast, and Frostblink for emergencies or to get over ledges. This is only a matter of personal preference. As for our curse, we pick Elemental Weakness if we deal 2 types of damage, or Frostbite if we mainly deal cold. In our gloves, we socket the mandatory pain in the ass totem setup, linked to Culling Strike, which is an extra 10% damage, not taken into account on POB. They are hard to maintain during most Uber bosses, but they do decently well for tier 17 bosses. In our boots, we have Enduring Cry linked to Call to Arms. Since we have a low life pool, it basically brings us to full health every couple of seconds, which feels really nice. It also generates endurance charges, which work really well with Immortal Call that we linked to automation support. The way you trigger your defensive skills is really up to you. You could link them to cast when damage taken or cast them manually. With my automation setup, I have around 50% uptime on Immortal Call. In our weapon, we have our Assassin's Mark on hit setup linked to Life Tap. This one is pretty self-explanatory since we're crit attack build. Finally, in our shield, we have our Reservation setup made of Grace, Arctic Armor, and Herald of Thunder. Now, why Herald of Thunder and not Ice? It works great with Circle of Regret, gets buffed by Peripecia, don't know how to pronounce that shield, which enables Trinity, and it feels really comfortable when barrel farming in tier 17s because they blow up without us needing to be in melee range. The skill tree is fairly regular, but let's take a look at the key aspects. We path through the right side of the tree, picking up the 3+1 max frenzy nodes. We go for the leech mastery and some claw nodes with the mastery. We take suppression nodes and the suppression mastery that we supplement with suppression tattoos to get capped. We also add a blind on hit tattoo if we have the dexterity to support it. We pick the attack projectile branch on the tree that works even if we're melee because frenzy has a projectile tag. We go for the reservation nodes on the bottom of the tree. So while editing the video, I realized I forgot something really important. Between the fortify and the reservation nodes at the bottom of the tree, we absolutely have to take the tribal fury node to deal splash damage. Otherwise, the build will not feel good at all. The fortify nodes, of course, and the 2 disciple charge nodes. We finish off our tree with some life, damage, and enough room for our cluster setup. Speaking of cluster jewels, we take a node that people don't usually want, aggressive defense. It's really good for a fortify build. That means these cluster jewels are pretty good Vow Orb targets for corrupted blood immunity because people usually see them as failed crafts and they sell them for cheap. Then we use a regular pressure points basics of pain medium cluster jewel. If we socket a Chaos Resistance Parandus Pack Prismatic Jewel near the claw nodes on the tree, we gain more than 70% Chaos Resistance. The most efficient placement for our Lethal Pride is next to the Acrobatics Keystone on the tree. Of course, the Sublime Vision is part of the core of the build. You can socket it anywhere. To finish, we chose to use a Forbidden Flesh and Flame combo. The most powerful node to steal is the Assassin's Deadly Infusion, but it can be quite pricey. Sabo's Explosive Expert is usually quite cheap and very efficient in our build. You could also take Soul Drinker for Overleech and to maintain your energy shield if you're focusing on bossing. Our ascendancy is straightforward. We already know we need Swift Killer because it grants us 2 extra frenzy charges. It's core to the build. We then take Polymath. Since we picked 11 different masteries, it grants us 33% more damage and a huge amount of life, ES, and mana recovery. It's the only way we currently manage to restore our energy shield. Since we designed this build with tier 17 mapping in mind, we then take Heartstopper and One Step Ahead for their defensive attributes. I didn't want to dedicate an entire section to leveling, but a lot of comments asked me about it for the last build, even though I did talk about it in my conclusion, so here goes. It took me 10 hours of game time to level my character this league. I am bad at leveling. Do not ask me for leveling tips. If you want leveling info, go on Maxroll and pick any league starter for Trickster, Assassin, or Sabo, then respec when you have some currency for it and the core items. So yeah, this build feels really good to play. It feels like you're playing a modded game, like you should not be able to bonk enemies so fast. 35 bonks per second. That has got to be a record, even for the most legendary wizards among you. Okay, bad joke. We all know that melee bad, but this build has cleared all Ubers, although some I didn't manage to kill deathless, but I kill them really fast. And it does really well in tier 17 maps, even very juiced ones, especially when you consider that it's a melee build. This build has allowed me to clear all 38 challenges on my own as well, even the Uber challenges. So if anyone has stayed until the end, thank you very much. Let me know with a bonk in the comments. I'd be really hyped. This video took even longer than the last one. I started working on this build guide on May 11th. I'm not sure when it will be finished. I don't know how real content creators do it. Also, I recently saw that an RMT website released a similar build guide, and honestly, their version seems really bad. I promise that if you give my take on Melee Frenzy Trickster a try, you will definitely not regret it. You'll have an awesome time. I'll finish the video by leaving you with an uber elder run that had 1 death, I think, and some pretty close calls, but you'll see that it went quite smoothly, all things considered, and yeah, I guess that's it. See you next time, maybe? I don't know.